My name is Sarah Calloway. I'm 32 years old. And I found out exactly what I was worth to my family from a gurney in the St. Clement ER with a cracked collarbone, glass still in my hair, and a 7-week-old daughter who needed someone to hold her through the night. My mother had 2 hours. I had already done the math. The drive from her house to the hospital was 19 minutes on a clear night. She had 2 hours before my daughter would be alone, and she said no. Not I can't. Not I'm on my way. She said no. She said it in 14 words, and those 14 words are the entire reason I'm sitting here telling you any of this. What I did in the next 4 minutes settled a debt my family doesn't know I've been tracking for 7 years. A debt that, when I finally let myself add it up in that hospital bed, came to $312,000. And that isn't the number that broke them. The number that broke them came 6 days later, in my father's own handwriting, in a ledger an old woman had kept for 11 years in a fireproof box under her bed. And the man who carried that box into the room walked with a limp and said nothing for a long time, and then said everything at once. Welcome back to Hidden Family Revenge, the channel where quiet people finally close the account. If someone in your life has ever treated your reliability as a resource they never had to replenish, this story is for you. Drop a comment and tell me the last time someone in your family only called when they needed something. And be sure to subscribe. I need to tell you about the night first, because the night is where everything starts. My husband, Marcus, was in Denver on a 3-day site survey. I was driving home from the urgent care clinic where I'd taken our daughter Lily for a weight check. She'd been slow to gain, and I'd been watching her numbers the way I watch all numbers, carefully without blinking, in case something shifted. She was in her rear-facing seat. She was fine. She had just eaten. The other driver ran the light at Calder and Fifth doing 42 miles per hour. I know it was 42 because that number appeared later in a police report I read myself because I am the kind of person who reads police reports. The impact hit the front passenger side. My collarbone fractured on the seatbelt. My head hit the side window. Lily, in the rear-facing seat designed for exactly this, was shaken but not hurt.
Checked. Cleared. Perfect.
I, on the other hand, was not cleared. I came into the ER on a backboard, and the first thing I said after they confirmed Lily was unharmed was, "Someone needs to take her." I had the presence of mind to say it clearly, which tells you something about the kind of person I was raised to be. Not raised to be, trained by 7 years of being the one who kept the engine running, to triage before I bleed. Marcus was in the air and unavailable. I called the only other number that made sense. My mother, Donna Calloway, who lived 19 minutes away and had been asking to spend more time with Lily since the day she was born. She picked up on the second ring. I told her I was in the ER. I told her I had a fractured collarbone and possible concussion. I told her Lily was with me, unhurt, and needed someone to take her home for the night. I told her Marcus was on a flight and would land in 3 hours. She said, "I'm in the middle of something." I asked her what she was in the middle of. She said, "Sarah, your brother is here, and we're having dinner. You're always in some kind of situation. You really need to learn to handle things without pulling everyone in." 14 words. You really need to learn to handle things without pulling everyone in. I heard my brother Cody's voice in the background, low and unbothered, asking if the pasta was ready. I hung up. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. The nurse standing beside the gurney watched me set the phone face down on the mattress, and I looked at her and said, "I need a pediatric certified overnight sitter, tonight, within 90 minutes. Do you have a contact, or should I use my own?" She blinked. She said she'd find the social worker on duty. I said, "I'll make the call myself, because that's what I do. That's always been what I do." You need to know who I am before that night makes complete sense, because the people who haven't been the steadfast one in their family sometimes look at a woman calmly arranging childcare from a gurney and mistake it for coldness. It isn't coldness. It's a skill you develop when you spend your formative years understanding that if you don't solve the problem, no one will. I grew up in Durango, Colorado, middle child of 3, which in our house meant the invisible one. Cody, my older brother, was the firstborn son and my parents' greatest ongoing project. Leah, my younger sister, was the baby, which meant she was treated like weather, loud when she arrived and forgiven for everything afterward. I was the one in between, the one the teachers described as self-sufficient, which is what teachers say about children who have learned not to ask. I put myself through a financial accounting degree at University of Colorado, working night shifts at a hotel front desk. I passed my CPA exam on the first attempt. I now work as a forensic accountant for a firm that investigates financial fraud, embezzlement, hidden assets, falsified books. My job, every single day, is to find the money that someone doesn't want found and to lay it out so clearly on a page that no one in the room can pretend they don't see it. The irony of what my family had been doing to my finances for 7 years is not lost on me. It wasn't lost on me that night either. Lying in that ER bay while a physician's assistant taped my collarbone and a sitter named Georgette drove across town to take my daughter home. I've spent my career finding other people's hidden money trails. I had never once turned that skill on my own family because some doors you don't open if you're not ready for what's behind them. That night, I became ready. Here is what the family transfers looked like on the surface, the way I'd always let myself see them without adding up the column. There was the loan I gave my parents in 2017 when my father's trucking business had a bad year, $28,000, interest-free, no paperwork because he was my father and I didn't want to make it transactional. There was my brother Cody's temporary rent assistance that started during COVID and never stopped, $1,100 a month for 31 months. There were the emergency transfers that arrived by text, car repairs, a medical bill, a security deposit when Leon moved apartments, a lawyer retainer when Cody had a DUI that the family collectively decided not to mention to anyone outside the house. There were the Christmas contributions I organized and mostly funded because someone had to. There were the smaller ones I barely registered anymore. $400 here, $800 there, a wire so automatic I sometimes forgot I'd sent it until it cleared. I had never added the column. I had told myself there was no column, that it was family, and family doesn't have columns. In the ER, at 11:40 on a Tuesday night, with the fluorescent lights humming and Georgette texting me a photo of Lily sleeping in her own crib, I opened my banking app and I let myself look. Not at a single transfer. At all of them. I typed my family members' names into the memo search field one by one. The app returned results in chronological order. Oldest first, the way a ledger would. The oldest result was dated March 14, 2017. 7 years, 4 months, and 17 days of being the column nobody counted. The total assembled itself at the bottom of my screen like a verdict. $312,440. I looked at it for a moment. Then I looked at the ceiling. Then I looked at it again because the number was so precise and so large and so completely invisible to everyone except the app and me that it felt like discovering a room in a house you've lived in for years. $312,440. Gone into a family that was, at this exact moment, eating pasta 19 minutes away. I did not close the app. I opened the recurring transfer screen, and I canceled every automated payment with the same 4 taps I'd used to set them up. Green check. Green check. Green check. Green check. The faucet closed. I felt nothing dramatic. That was the strangest part. I expected grief or rage or the particular sorrow of a person who has been generous to her own detriment for 7 years and is only now understanding the shape of it. What I felt instead was the precise flat clarity I feel when a set of accounts finally reconciles, when the number on the left matches the number on the right, and the discrepancy has been found and named. The discrepancy had a name. It was $312,440. And I had just stopped it from growing. Then I started reading. This is the part one want you to understand because I am a forensic accountant, and what I do next is not dramatic or emotional or impulsive. It is professional. I exported 7 years of statements to a file, opened my banking app's data download, and began building the categorization I should have built years ago. I had my laptop in my bag, because I always have my laptop in my bag. I propped it on the rolling tray table the nurse had pushed over without being asked, and I worked. It took me 2.5 hours. My collarbone hurt the entire time, and I didn't stop. Here is what I found when I sorted the $312,440 by recipient and purpose. My father's business loan, $28,000. Of that, $9,400 had been repaid over the first year, and then the payments simply stopped. The remaining $18,600 was never mentioned again. I had not mentioned it either. I had written it off in my head as a gift, which is exactly what someone who doesn't read their own ledger does. Cody's rent assistance, $34,100 over 31 months. During the same period, Cody had posted on Instagram from a lake house rental in Wyoming and a ski weekend in Telluride. I know this because I went back and looked. I had been paying his rent, so he could afford his content. Leah's deposits, emergencies, and the lawyer retainer, $41,200. Leah had a full-time job at a marketing agency that paid $67,000 a year. I knew this because she had told me when she got the raise. I had never once done the math that placed her income against her apparent need. My parents' various requests, the ones framed as temporary, as grateful, as soon to be repaid, totaled $218,540. Of that $218,540, I could trace approximately $44,000 to things that looked like genuine household expenses: a furnace replacement, property taxes paid twice when they fell behind, medical copays, a car repair. The remaining $174,540 had left my parents' accounts in cash, or in transfers to a third-party account I didn't recognize. I ran the account number through a reverse lookup that I use professionally. It came back registered to an LLC. The LLC's registered name was Three Peaks Holdings. I knew that name. It was my father's second cousin Raymond's company, a man I had met 4 times, who had a boat, who had, I now recalled, started appearing in my parents' stories about 3 years ago. Stories about investments. Good opportunities. Nothing specific, nothing I'd pressed on because it wasn't my business. $174,540 of my money had gone into a boat owner's LLC. I sat back as far as the collarbone allowed, and I looked at the screen and I thought, this is what embezzlement looks like from the inside. Not malice in a room. Just a series of small transactions that each looked reasonable until you stood far enough back to see the shape of them. I printed the summary to a single page. 12 rows. 7 years. $312,440. I folded it in half and I put it in my laptop bag, and I asked the nurse if I could have a cup of coffee, and she brought me one without a word. My father's name is Kenneth Calloway. He is 63 years old, a man who used to be large in the way outdoor men are, ruddy, capable-looking, the kind of man who fix things on weekends. In the last 5 years, he has gotten smaller. I noticed it, but I assigned it to age. I understand now it was something else. He called me the morning after the accident. He didn't know about the canceled transfers yet. He called because my mother had apparently told him there had been an accident, and he was worried in the distant, unpracticed way of a man who doesn't know how to worry usefully. He asked if I was okay. I told him I had a fractured collarbone and a mild concussion, and that Lily was fine. He said, "Oh, Sarah, you should have called us." I should have called them. I asked him, very evenly, what would have happened if I had. There was a pause. He said, "Your mother would have come." But her voice on the phone had told me something different, and I told him that, quietly, and he went silent in the particular way of a man who knows the truth and has decided not to defend it. What you need to understand about my father is that he is not the architect of what my family did. He is the building that allowed it to happen because he never once chose to be the load-bearing wall himself. He knew the transfers were coming from me. He accepted them. He didn't ask where they went after. He told himself that was my mother's department, the way he told himself the business books were his accountant's department and the household bills were handled and the children were fine. I understand my father completely. I was still done. 3 days after the accident, my collarbone held together with a sling and a determination that had always been my most load-bearing feature. I was sitting at my kitchen table feeding Lily when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Colorado Springs area code. I answered it because I answer numbers I don't recognize. Information is always worth the 30 seconds. The voice was an old woman's. Dry and precise, the way voices get when they have stopped performing warmth for anyone who hasn't earned it. She said, "My name is Vivian Marco. I was your grandmother Clara's attorney for 11 years. I've been waiting for you to be ready to have this conversation. I put down the bottle. I said, I'm listening. Clara Calloway was my father's mother. She died 8 months ago, quietly, at 81, in the house she'd owned for 40 years in Colorado Springs. I had been close to her when I was young. She was the person who first explained to me what a balance sheet was, who told me that numbers were the most honest language anyone had ever invented, who bought me my first accounting textbook when I was 14 and said, learn this, and no one can lie to you with money. She had been, in other words, the person who gave me the skill my family had been exploiting by hiding their losses from me. In her final 2 years, Clara had grown suspicious. She had watched my parents' lifestyle. She had asked my father direct questions about the business and received indirect answers. She had, with the quiet precision of a woman who grew up during a depression and never forgot it, begun keeping a ledger of her own. Vivian Marco told me that my grandmother had documented, in her own handwriting, 41 separate instances of my parents requesting or receiving money they had told her came from their own resources. She had cross-referenced dates. She had noted discrepancies. In her last clear months, she had sat with her attorney twice a week for 6 weeks and done the thing I had been unable to do for 7 years. She had read the column, and she had done something with what she found. Clara Calloway's estate had been worth $890,000. The house, a parcel of land adjacent to it, investment accounts she had tended for 50 years, and the contents of a fireproof box that had sat under her bed for 11 years. My father had expected to inherit the house and the accounts. He had, in the comfortable way of people who have never been refused anything by the person they're taking advantage of, already mentioned the inheritance to my mother. Had already, I would learn, promised a portion of it to Raymond and Three Peaks Holdings. Clara had placed the entire estate in a trust. The trust had one beneficiary.
Me.
Not split. Not divided. Not a portion with conditions. All of it, including the house, including the land, including a personal letter she had written in November of last year and sealed with the instruction that it be delivered only when I, in the judgment of her attorney, was ready to receive it. Vivian had been watching. She had read about the accident in the local incident report, the way attorneys in small legal circles sometimes do. She had called my husband's office to confirm I had survived. She had waited 3 days and called me herself. She said, Clara's instruction was to wait until you'd had a reason to look at your own numbers. She believed you would eventually. She said you were too good at your job to stay blind forever. I thought about my grandmother, about the accounting textbook, about the sentence she'd said to me when I was 14, learn this and no one can lie to you with money. She had spent the last year of her life making sure that when they finally tried, I would have something in return. I told Vivian I was ready. She said, I'll bring the box. Vivian Marco arrived at my house on a Thursday evening, compact, 70-something, in a blazer that said she had not retired but had simply stopped caring whether other people knew she was still working. She carried a fireproof box the size of a carry-on under one arm and a file accordion under the other. She set the box on my kitchen table, fitted a key from her keychain, and opened it. Inside, in Clara's handwriting, were 11 years of observations. Notes, dates, amounts, names. Raymond's company, the boat. The ski weekends Cody posted about while I paid his rent. A newspaper clipping about a casino opening in Black Hawk with a small pencil mark in the margin next to my mother's name. The letter, sealed, with my name on the front in my grandmother's deliberate cursive. And clipped to the inside of the lid, a single index card that read, She'll know what to do with it. She always does. I held that card for a long time. Then I opened the letter. I won't read you everything it said. Some of it belongs only to me. But the part that matters, the part one want you to have, was a single paragraph near the end. She wrote, I know you've been the one holding this family up. I know because I watched you learn to be useful before you learned to be loved, and I recognized it because I did the same thing for the same people, and it cost me 40 years. I am not leaving you this, so you can be comfortable. I am leaving you this so you can be free. Do what you need to do with the truth, and then put it down and don't pick it back up. The ledger is closed, Sarah. Close yours too. I folded the letter. I asked Vivian what my father knew. She said, the trust was filed with the court. He knows he wasn't named. He doesn't know about the ledger or the box. I asked her, quiet or true? She looked at me over her reading glasses. She said, your grandmother specifically said she wanted it true. She said quiet had never worked for this family. I said, then I'll need a copy of the summary page. She already had it printed. She slid it across the table, like a woman who had done this before. I put it behind the single page I had printed in the ER, in the laptop bag that had not left my side in 6 days. 2 pages now. 12 rows of mine. 11 years of Clara's. I went to bed, and I slept for the first time since the accident. My mother called 4 days after the canceled transfers to ask whether there had been a problem with the bank. She used the warm voice, the one she reserves for waiters and relatives she needs something from. I had grown up inside that voice and understood its architecture completely. She said, Sarah, honey, I've been so worried about you. Fractured collarbone and that sweet baby. I feel just awful I couldn't get there that night. Cody was having a hard time, and you know how he gets, and I've been meaning to call. I said, the transfers were intentional. Silence. Then the recalibration I could feel even through the phone. She said, I don't understand. Your father and I have been struggling, and after everything we never asked for charity. We were counting on you. You're the one who always manages. You really need to learn to handle things without pulling everyone into your drama. It's not like the rest of us don't have our own problems. There it was. The second time. Dressed differently now, pointed at me instead of past me, but the same 14 words rearranged into the same shape. I said, I know, Mom. I'll see you Sunday.
She didn't know there was a Sunday planned.
She didn't know I was the one planning it. She thought I was agreeing to disappear quietly the way I had always disappeared quietly, back into the machinery of being useful, the account replenished, the column reset to 0. She said, oh, good. We'll all feel better if we can just talk this through as a family. I said, yes, I think so too. I spent Saturday preparing the way I prepare for a deposition. I had 2 documents. I had 1 witness. I had a fireproof box. I had a fractured collarbone that I was no longer going to pretend didn't hurt. And I had 7 years of being told directly, laterally, atmospherically, that I was the capable one, the strong one, the one who handled things, the one who didn't need to be worried about, because she always landed on her feet. I had spent 7 years being the account they drew from without ever making a deposit. Sunday was at my parents' house, the house that was not my parents' house. The house on the trust documents that Vivian had filed in probate was Clara's house, which sat on Clara's land, which had been deeded to Clara by her own parents in 1974, and which she had paid the taxes on herself for 40 years. My father had been living in it since Clara moved to assisted living, treating it the way he treated my money, as a resource that would always be there, because it always had been. Cody was there. Leah was there. My father, quiet and diminished in his armchair. My mother at the center of the room, moving with the particular energy of a person who has called the meeting and controls the agenda. Marcus sat beside me with Lily in his arms. He knew everything. He had read the spreadsheet and the letter, and he had held my hand and said nothing for a long time, and then said, whatever you decide, I'm in the chair next to you. Vivian Marco did not come inside. She was in her car at the curb. She had told me, I'll come in when you text me. 1 word is fine. My mother opened with condolences about the accident and a performance of relief about Lily, and a segue into how worried they'd all been and how it had been a hard few weeks for everyone, gesturing at Cody in a way that suggested his hardship was equivalent, which it was not. She did not mention the canceled transfers directly. She was circling. She told Cody and Leah that Sarah had been under a lot of stress with the new baby, which was her framing for what I had done. Stress. As if my 7 years of funding her life were a symptom of poor coping, and the canceled transfers were a relapse. And then she said it, the 3rd time, the way she always said it when she needed the room to understand that I was the problem and not the solution. She said, you know, your sister never has these situations. Leah always manages without the drama. Sarah, you've always been complicated. You really need to learn to handle things without pulling everyone in. Leah looked at the floor. She knew, now, where her deposits had come from. I had told her Friday, quietly, without accusation, just the number and the dates. She had cried. She had said she hadn't known. I believed her.
My mother had been careful about that.
I reached into the laptop bag on the floor beside my chair, and I took out 2 sheets of paper. I unfolded them on my knee. I didn't stand up. I didn't raise my voice. I looked at my mother, and I said, in the same register I use when I present findings to a board of directors, "Mom, you're right. Leah doesn't have these situations. I'd like everyone to understand why." I set the first page on the coffee table.
Mine.
12 rows. $312,440. I said, "This is every dollar I sent this family since 2017. The top rows are the ones that went where I believed they were going." I pointed to the legitimate amounts: Dad's business, the furnace, the property taxes. $44,000 over 7 years. The rest, and I moved my finger to the larger number, went somewhere else. $174,000 of it went to Three Peaks Holdings, Raymond's company. I'd like someone to explain that. My father's face changed. My mother did not look at the page. I set the second page beside the first. Clara's summary. 11 years of my grandmother's handwriting, indexed, dated, cross-referenced. I said, "This is your mother's ledger, Dad. She kept it for 11 years. She noticed. She always noticed. She just waited until she could do something about it." Then I took out my phone, and I texted one word to a contact saved as Vivian M.
The word was, now.
And I want to stop here for one moment, because if you've been the one in your family who got called capable and reliable and strong while someone else got called lovable and struggling and in need, you already know what room I'm describing. The room where your stability gets treated as an infinite resource and your actual needs get treated as drama. If you've ever wired money on trust and never checked where it landed, open one statement tonight. Just one. Export 1 year. Run the column. Because what I found in that ER in 2.5 hours with a fractured collarbone, you can find in 20 minutes at your own kitchen table. Subscribe, because Vivian is about to walk through that door, and what she carries with her is the part that ends this for good. The front door opened. Vivian Marco came in with a fireproof box and the accordion file and the expression of a woman who had been waiting 8 months for this exact moment. She set the box on the table beside my 2 pages. She introduced herself to my father in 3 sentences, told him her name, her relationship to Clara, and the nature of the document she was about to describe. She said, Clara Calloway's estate was placed in a trust 11 months before her death. The trust was filed in El Paso County Probate last spring. The beneficiary is Sarah Calloway. The property at 412 Whitmore Road, the adjacent parcel, and all accounts are held in trust for Sarah outright, with no conditions, effective immediately on the resolution of probate, which concluded 6 weeks ago. My father said nothing. He looked at his hands. My mother said, "That is not right." We were told. Vivian said, "You were not named in the trust. There is no provision for a surviving spouse or child." Clara was explicit. She amended the trust twice in her final year to ensure it was clean. My mother turned to my father.
"Kenneth," she said.
"This is your mother. You need to." My father lifted his head. He looked at me. He looked at the ledger, his mother's handwriting, 11 years of dates and amounts. He looked at my first page. 12 rows. The column he had never read. He said, "She always knew, didn't she?"
I said, "Yes."
He said, "I'm sorry, Sarah." He said it quietly, barely over a breath. And I believed him. I believed he was sorry. I also knew that sorry arrived 11 years too late, and from a man sitting in a house he had assumed was his while his mother watched every dollar I sent disappear into a boat owners LLC. I understood my father completely. I was still done. My mother cycled through everything available to her in sequence: tears, then outrage, then an appeal to Cody, who looked at the floor, then a pivot to Leah, who was already crying in the corner, then a declaration that she would contest the trust, that Clara had not been of sound mind, that this was a conspiracy she intended to expose. Vivian said, mildly, the trust was witnessed, notarized, and amended twice. Clara passed a competency review at each amendment. Her physicians signed off. The paperwork is, as far as my firm can determine, clean. My mother said, Sarah, you cannot do this to your family. You are all we have. We raised you. You really need to learn to handle things without pulling everyone in. The fourth time. In that room, in front of her husband and both her other children and a stranger with a fireproof box. She said it to explain why I was wrong to stop. She didn't hear it the way I heard it. She didn't hear it as a sentence that had been used to send me back to the machinery every time I got close to the door. I gathered my 2 pages. I stood, slowly, because the collarbone was still teaching me things about my own limits. I said, Mom, I've been handling things without pulling everyone in for 7 years. I have the receipts right here. I'm done handling things for people who couldn't drive 19 minutes when I was on a gurney. I didn't slam anything. I didn't raise my voice. I picked up the laptop bag, took Lily from Marcus, and walked to the door. My father watched me go.
He didn't stand.
I didn't expect him to. What I expected from my father was exactly what I received, which is why I had stopped expecting anything. Cody caught me on the porch. He looked younger than 34. He said, Sarah, I didn't know it was your money. I said, I know. He said, I'll pay you back. I said, Cody, you and I both know you won't. And I'm not going to carry that expectation either. He stood there in the cold, and I walked to the car. Here is how it settled, because I know you want to know, and I believe in giving people the whole ledger. The trust held. My mother called 2 attorneys. Both told her variations of the same thing. A clean trust with a competency-reviewed grantor and 2 witnessed amendments is very difficult to contest and very expensive to attempt.
She did not attempt it.
She and my father still live in the house because the trust permits them lifetime tenancy. I am not my mother, and I don't remove old people from their homes regardless of what those homes have cost me. But the house is mine now, and so is the land next to it. And so are the investment accounts my grandmother tended for 50 years with the same quiet precision she used to keep her ledger. Raymond of Three Peaks Holdings received a letter from Vivian's firm 6 weeks after the dinner. Vivian does not do things halfway. Cody got a real job. Not because of me. Because Leah, who had cried in the corner and then driven home and read the spreadsheet I'd sent her, and not slept for 2 days, had a long conversation with him that I was not part of and do not know the contents of. He works in logistics now. He texted me on a Tuesday to ask if he could visit Lily.
I said yes.
We are building something small and careful, and I am not funding it. Leah sends me a card on Lily's monthly birthday. Not a text. A card with a stamp. We talk on Sundays now. She is learning at 28 what things actually cost. I think she will be all right. My father calls from the car. Only ever from the car, which I understand to mean only when my mother can't hear. I always answer. We talk about small things. He does not apologize again, and I do not ask him to. The one he gave me in that room was real, and was all I needed, and was 11 years late, and I have put it somewhere I can find it when I need it and somewhere it can't be taken back. Georgette, the sitter who answered on the second ring that night, still works for the agency. I sent her a bonus when the trust cleared. She texted back a single emoji, and I understood exactly what she meant. Vivian came to Lily's 4-month milestone dinner, uninvited but expected, with a bottle of wine and Clara's index card in a small frame. The one that said she'll know what to do with it. She always does. It sits on my bookshelf next to my CPA license, and I see it every morning when I come to my desk. Clara's fireproof box is in my closet. Empty now. I don't need the contents anymore. They've been entered into evidence, so to speak, but I keep the box because it is the correct size and the correct weight, and I know what it took to fill it. There are people in your life right now who are praising your strength and your capability and your remarkable ability to handle things.
Some of them mean it as a compliment.
Some of them mean it as a maintenance schedule. The difference between those 2 groups is visible in exactly one place: what happens the night you stop. The people who meant it as a compliment call to check on you. The people who meant it as a maintenance schedule call to ask what went wrong with the account. I learned that from a gurney in the St. Clement Yard at 11:40 on a Tuesday, with glass in my hair and a 7-week-old daughter sleeping safely 40 minutes away, while the people who raised me ate pasta and told each other I'd handle it. I handled it. I always do. The difference is that this time, I handled it for me. If this reminded you to pull one bank statement and read it like a stranger would, do it tonight. You already know what you're looking for. You've known for a while. And if you know someone in your life who always handles it, who always manages, who never asks and always delivers, share this with them. Drop a comment.
Hit subscribe.
And I'll see you in the next one.